My name is Kira Whitman. I am 30 years old. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I signed the largest contract of my career, a $14 million commercial development project. Site supervisor, my name on the paperwork, my crew answering to me. I didn't tell my family. I was going to announce it over dinner, over the sweet potato casserole my dad always asks for twice. Then my mother called and told me my brother didn't want me at the table. That my job, construction, 7 years, honest work, would embarrass him in front of his new girlfriend. I said I understood. I let them have their dinner. What none of them knew was who that girlfriend's father was. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back 7 years, to the first morning I showed up on a job site and someone handed me a hard hat like it was a question. I chose construction. I want to be clear about that. I have an associate's degree. I'm good with numbers. I can hold a conversation with anyone in any room. I chose this work because I am good at it, because at the end of every shift, I can point at something real and say, I built that. My first site smelled like wet concrete and cut lumber and the particular sharpness of metal in cold air. The foreman that first morning was a man named Ray, 62 years old, hands like worn leather, a voice that didn't raise itself unless something was genuinely wrong. He watched me work for 3 days before he said anything. On the 4th morning, he handed me a level and said, "You measure twice before you cut. Most people measure once and wonder why it doesn't fit." I was 23. I thought he was talking about carpentry. He was talking about everything. Ray had started in construction at 19. No degree, no family connections. Just showing up every morning in the same worn boots, doing the work that needed doing, until people stopped questioning whether he belonged and started asking what he thought. By the time I met him, he had built half the commercial buildings in our county. He never raised his voice at a client meeting. He never needed to. The work spoke. My family's relationship with my career was different. My mother asked at every holiday whether I had thought about something in an office. My brother Theo, 4 years younger, had a business degree and a desk job and referred to my work as the site stuff in a tone that made it sound temporary. I noticed. I filed it away. I kept showing up. I sensed what they thought of my choices long before anyone said it directly. I just didn't expect them to say it out loud. The call came on a Tuesday evening in November. I was driving home from a 12-hour shift, still in my high-vis vest, windows down because the truck heater runs hot. I picked up, expecting Christmas plans, maybe a grocery request. Instead, there was a pause on the line. The kind of pause that means whatever comes next has been rehearsed. "Kira, honey," my mother said, "about Thanksgiving this year?" I told her I'd already planned the sweet potato casserole. Another pause. "We're doing something a little different. Your brother Theo is bringing someone. It's serious, apparently, and he wants to make a good impression." I said that was wonderful. I meant it. "The thing is," she continued, her voice dropping like she was delivering a weather report about a storm she couldn't stop. "He called us last night. He said he doesn't want you there." My truck was still moving. I felt like I had stopped. "He said your job might make her uncomfortable, that you'd show up in work clothes or talk about construction, or that she'd ask what you do and it would be, his word, awkward. He said your blue-collar job would embarrass him in front of her." I didn't say anything for a long time. He just watched the road and breathed. "We didn't want to upset you," Mom added. "But it's important to Theo that this goes smoothly. You understand, don't you?" That's the word they use for everything that used to be family. Smoothly, comfortable, making a good impression. As if my presence at my own family's table were simply a variable to be managed for someone else's benefit. I said, "I understand." I meant something entirely different by it than she thought I did. I decided, quietly and without telling anyone, to let them have their dinner. I was curious what 5 days would teach them, I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes after I hung up. My neighbor's kid was drawing chalk shapes on the sidewalk across the street. A yellow sun, a lopsided house, a family of stick figures holding hands. I watched her until the tightness in my chest loosened just enough for me to go inside. That night, I didn't call anyone. I didn't vent. I didn't plan. I just sat with it. Let myself feel the specific humiliation of being told your presence is a liability. That the life you built with your own hands is something your family needs to hide. What they didn't know, what no one in my family knew yet, was that 3 weeks earlier I had signed the contract. $14 million. Commercial development. Site supervisor. My name. My crew. I had been waiting to announce it at Thanksgiving, over the casserole. With everyone together, they had taken that moment, so I decided to let them keep it, for now. Have you ever held something important quietly, while someone underestimated you completely? Tell me in the comments. I read them. Thanksgiving came and went without me. I spent it alone, which sounds sadder than it actually was. I made roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and yes, the sweet potato casserole. Because I wasn't going to let Theo ruin my favorite recipe, I ate at my own table, in my own apartment, that I pay for with money I earned by showing up every single day. What I didn't know was what was happening across town while I was sitting in that quiet. Theo's girlfriend's name was Sarah Calloway, 24 years old. Sharp eyes, quick laugh, and a family that had been in commercial construction for 30 years. Her father had started pouring concrete at 19. He now employed 340 people. Construction wasn't something Sarah found awkward. It was her entire family's world. When Theo, over dinner, made an offhand comment about his family being white-collar, very career-focused, Sarah had smiled politely and asked about siblings. Theo said he had one sister. Sarah asked what she did. Theo said she worked in construction, in the same tone you'd use to say someone had a parking violation on their record. Sarah put her fork down. And across town, I was eating sweet potato casserole alone and had no idea any of this was happening. I went to sleep that night, not knowing that Theo had just walked himself into the most expensive mistake of his assumptions. He'd find that out in about 5 days. Sarah asked what kind of construction. Theo said he wasn't really sure of the details. She asked if his sister had her own projects or worked under someone. He said he assumed she just worked on sites. She asked why his sister wasn't at dinner, and that's when my mother, who had been quiet through all of this, made the mistake of telling the truth. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because this is where everything turns. Sarah looked at Theo for a long moment, not with anger, with something more unsettling than anger, the clear-eyed, measuring look of someone recalculating everything they thought they knew about a person. She said, quietly and without drama, that in her family, the people who built things with their hands were the most respected people at any table, that her father had started out pouring concrete at 19 and now employed 340 people, that she would have loved to meet his sister. Theo tried to recover. He laughed, said he just thought it might be awkward given the difference in their worlds. Sarah said she didn't think their worlds were as different as he seemed to think, and she'd like to be the judge of that herself. The dinner didn't end, but the temperature of the room changed in a way that never quite recovered. 5 days later, on a Sunday morning, I heard a knock at my door. My mother, my father, Theo, they came inside. I made coffee, because I wasn't raised to leave people standing without offering something hot, even when those people had recently made me feel like an embarrassment to my own bloodline. Mom started. She explained about Sarah, about the dinner, about what Theo had said and how Sarah had responded. Then she looked at Theo. He stared at his coffee cup. I found out about the contract, he said. I waited. Leanne posted something on her story, tagged your company. He paused. Kira, you're running a $12 million development project. 14, I said. It went up after the scope revision. The silence that followed was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. And I say that without any guilt at all. I wish this were different. I wish Theo had been the kind of brother who would have introduced me proudly instead of hiding me quietly. I wish my mother had pushed back the moment he called. But wishes don't hold up. $14 million contracts due. It was 11:50 p.m., the night before they knocked on my door. I was at my desk, reviewing the revised scope documents for the project, line items, subcontractor schedules, permit timelines. The apartment was quiet. The lamp on my desk made a small circle of light. My phone showed a notification. Leanne had posted something, tagged the company, tagged the project. I looked at it for a long moment. I did not take it down. I did not call Theo. I did not prepare a speech. I simply closed the notification and went back to the scope documents. Because the work was real, whether anyone in my family knew about it or not. That was the thing they had never understood, that I had not been building toward their approval. I had been building toward something that would stand on its own, with or without a seat at their table. The clock on my laptop moved to a las 2:03 nu umaga. I am 30 years old. I am the site supervisor of a $14 million commercial development, and across town, Theo was likely lying awake, having just seen Leanne's post, doing the math, understanding something about his sister that he had never bothered to find out before. He'll be at my door in about 9 hours. Dad cleared his throat first. He said he was proud of me. I thanked him, and I said, calmly, that it would have been nice to hear that before I was excluded from a family holiday. Mom started crying. I handed her a napkin and let her cry, because some things need to be felt fully before they can be resolved. Theo's apology wasn't perfect. It had some self-justification woven in, a little too much explanation of what he'd been thinking. But it was real enough that I accepted it, not entirely for his sake, for mine, because carrying that particular kind of hurt is heavy, and I do enough heavy lifting at work. He looked at me like I was still the sister whose job he thought would embarrass him at a dinner table. I wasn't. I hadn't been for 7 years. What nobody said out loud, but everyone in that room understood, was this. The thing Theo had been ashamed of was the exact thing that made Sarah respect me before she had ever met me. He tried to hide me, and ended up revealing himself instead. They used to say, measure twice before you cut. Most people measure once and wonder why it doesn't fit. I always thought he meant carpentry. He meant something larger. He meant, do the work carefully, completely, before anyone is watching. Because the work is what holds, long after the opinions have shifted. Sarah and I met for coffee the following week. We talked for 2 hours. She told me about her father walking past buildings he poured concrete in 30 years ago and still getting emotional. I told her about the day I first ran my own crew and how it felt like something finally clicking into place. We exchanged real numbers before we left. Last month, her father reached out to me professionally. He'd heard about our project through industry channels. He wanted to discuss a potential collaboration in the spring. My brother tried to hide me from his table. Instead, he walked me into a room I didn't even know I needed to be in. As for me, I'm still in my steel-toed boots. I still smell like sawdust at the end of a long day. My hands are still calloused, and my left heel is still worn down, and I have never once been ashamed of any of it. I think about Ray every time I hand someone a level for the first time, and I think, the work always speaks. You just have to be patient enough to let it. If you have ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better, and then watched them realize their mistake in real time, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments. And if this story moved you, subscribe. There are more to come.